the diaphragm is this beautiful plate of muscle that when we inhale moves down in the body, when we exhale it lifts. When it's working properly, we are getting a continual massage, a mechanical movement for these organs, which creates heat and energy. It's also the foundation for the rib cage and everything above. So if it's strong, it's supporting this. There's a whole bunch of other amazing things about the diaphragm, but the reality is pain, fear, and stress cause you to reactively hold the breath. So think of a deer who survives an attack. They shake. They let out that negative energy in the moment. But when we have trauma, typically as humans, we hold the breath and then we go from that point forward, aging more dramatically.
Deanna Hansen, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Les. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm always excited when somebody reaches out and it's like, oh, I know them. I've already seen their work. So I've definitely seen a lot of your videos on YouTube. You have a pretty big catalog of content on YouTube. And I understand you wrote a book on the same topic that your YouTube videos are. Is the book already out?
Yes, it is. It's called Unblock Your Body, How Fascia Decompression is the Missing Link in Healing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you clearly have put a lot of time into exploring how to interact with fascia and, other nuances of the body around like adhesions or scar tissue or different things to kind of unleash like forward progress in all things wellness, I guess. That's my take on it.
I love how you just put that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, you're welcome to use that in the future. So what I haven't really heard anything about what got you into that. So maybe you could lead off with like letting us know what was the on-ramp to dive so deep into this topic.
Wow, thank you. Great question. And so it was 26 years ago almost now where at the age of 30, I was really struggling in my life. I was already an athletic therapist for a number of years at that time, diving deep into people's bodies with my hands. As an athletic therapist in Canada here, it's very much like physiotherapy, but we're trained to work with professional athletes. And I really took all of the things that I learned and I focused on deep tissue work. So I had a very good understanding of scar tissue with my hands in my practice. But as I was going through my 20s and accumulating a lot of trauma and stress in my body, the harder that I was working out, the worse my body became. I was compressing, ballooning, becoming more toxic. I was 50 pounds overweight, struggling with anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and all of the things that I was taught to do for others and applying to myself was actually taking me in the wrong direction. So when I was 30 years old, I made some big changes in my life, and as a result of those changes, I started having really severe anxiety attacks. But it was this one anxiety attack in particular that was really the seed of everything to come. In the moment, I actually thought I was going to die because I was trapped with fear. I locked away from my breath for a moment. So for some reason, I intuitively dove my hand into my abdomen. Now, because this was where I carried the majority of my weight, I really despised that area of my body. So I never touched it, let alone let anyone else. So now I'm diving in here in this critical moment, and the first thing I encountered was pain. But the pain took me out of the anxiety. It brought me back into my body. And so I just started intuitively exploring with my hands in that area. And what I felt was my tissue was marbled with what felt like scar tissue, even though I hadn't had any injury or surgery in that area. So I continued to work in this space, and the first thing that I felt was calm, which was so not my normal. So as I continued to work further, I suddenly had all these realizations, like no wonder when I'm coming home from a 5-mile run dripping wet with sweat, my abdomen would still feel cold. So that was a real turning point for me because I also had recently started the practice of yoga, and I had this wonderful teacher that probably every 30, 45 seconds in position, she would remind us to breathe. And I would recognize that I'm not breathing every time she would signal the breath. So all of this was being uncovered just, in that moment. So for the first evening, I spent 30, 45 minutes working in my abdomen. Woke up the next day, felt a little tender, but the tenderness actually kept me in my body. So after working all day on my patients, I came back home, dove back in, and after the second night of my work, when I stood up, I felt taller, and I went and I looked at myself in the mirror, and my belly was flatter than it had looked in years. And I mean 400 sit-ups a day, Thai bow, weights, all of it. I mean, I was trying so hard to change my body, and the harder I tried, the more compressed, the more ballooned, and the more toxic I became. So, in 2 nights, to see such a dramatic result, that became my new practice. I would come home from work all day, I would continue working in my body, and then within 2 weeks, my chronic low back pain was going away, my neck pain was changing, my outlook on life was completely different. So I started flipping my patients on their back, and I started approaching their bodies in a similar way. And it wasn't long before I started attracting other therapists that wanted to learn this. So that was 26 years ago, and that was the seed of how this whole thing started for me.
Well, that's interesting. It's interesting something you just said about I never let anybody else touch, like you didn't like that part of your body, which I'm sure is really common when people have like more belly than they want to have. And I like, I think it's very common that people have some level of, I want to say like dysfunction in their, in their guts. Like, they say, your health really is like centered on the health of your gut. I wonder what that emotional, that like negative self-talk subconsciously is probably really interfering with people's progress also. Like the fact that, yeah, I'm not going to let anybody touch it. I don't like to touch it. I don't like that it's there. And it's like, man, that probably is not something that your cells like to hear, that like shit talking about yourself. Like that's you, it's your body.
Yeah, and there was so much shame. I mean, I came from a family where I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and very much how we looked meant our value and our worth in life. And so this took away from my sense of me being worthy and the insecurities that surrounded that. I would look at these women that would have the hourglass figure, and they would move with such grace and ease, and I felt like I was slugging along through life, and I was just not worthy of being loved because I felt so ugly as a result of it. So that was really what was stored in there. And I mean, it was breasts too, belly and breasts. That's where I seem to store it all. I'm a Cancer of the Crab, and they do say that this is where we store all of that trauma and size, and that was absolutely it. So,
so you think it initiated by more of the lack of self-worth as a child that led you to have that, or is that what you were alluding to, or?
Okay, you're getting it personal now.
Okay,
So,
well, only what you're
no,
comfortable with.
I'm cool to do this. When I was a teenager, when I was in grade 10, I won the Scholar Athlete of the Year award in a private girls' school. I was doing well. My path was going in the direction that at the time I had set out for myself and my parents had set out for me. And in this private girls' school, I was the head of the volleyball team for years. I was a provincial volleyball player. I was a Manitoba champion Highland dancer 5 times. So in my younger years, these were the things that I was doing that gave me that positive response back. And then 2 weeks before I graduated in grade 12, I got caught for impaired driving. And that turned my life in a completely different direction. Suddenly there was a black cloud over my head. I embarrassed my school, my parents, and then my path got dramatically altered. It was like my whole foundation was rocked. That started me on negative behaviors. It was the whole thing, right? So that accumulated into my 20s. And as much as I was able to follow through with university and certify, I certainly wasn't living the life that was expected of me. And there was so many bouts of feelings of failure and, again, lack of self-worth. So all of that really accumulated to bring me into that moment in my 20s when I was just so dramatically, disassociated from my soul, I felt, really.
You mentioned originally that you were going through changes, like when this all happened that led to the panic or anxiety. Like you were going through changes already to address something, but it was like backfiring. Like what were those changes? Are you just talking about like working out harder and harder, like trying to like push through to get a solution, or?
Yes, that, but also just, how I felt I was expected to be in my life. I was married twice, before the age of 30. And so those ended. I ended up getting back together with my second husband for a period of time, but my relationships were failing, and just my sense of who I was and who I was supposed to be was just completely skewed from where I thought I would be. So that, caused the cycles of like, drinking, hiding, suppressing all of the things. And then, messing up relationships as a result of the behaviors. So it was wrapped in the entire way I was in my life.
Gotcha. And then it hit a tipping point.
Hit a tipping point.
So you mentioned also when you were putting your hands in your guts there, or abdomen, that the pain helped the anxiety go away. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, because I was like living outside of myself so much. I was either, again, drinking so I didn't feel, or not living a very present life at all, because partly I wasn't breathing, and now I've learned how significant the breath is, the diaphragmatic breath, to be living in the moment. So I was always living in the future of like where I was terrified to go, so shamed and guilt ridden with my past that I was never here. And then suddenly, boom, my hand is in my abdomen, and I'm now in my body, and I'm present for that moment. And that feeling of being present with the pain, for me, the anxiety I lived with, pain was so secondary to anxiety, pain became the friend. So now I'm putting pressure in here, I encounter pain, but I'm breathing and I'm in the moment. So it was such a beautiful minute for me to recognize how to get back into my body and to start to uncover the breath that was lacking.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Well, I've been experiencing some of that pain too. I've been following, you sent over like a sample video package, and I've been going through it. And I don't have your fancy tool that I'm sure you'll get into later, but I was using the recommended like rolled up towel thing, and I've done a ton of like soft tissue work and fascia release over the years, like lots of it. It's definitely part of my lifestyle. But I was kind of surprised. Like the towel was a really good tool. Like I got a response from that I wouldn't have expected. I think a lot of the tools that I do have aren't as inviting as a towel, so you don't maybe go as far because you might grip a little earlier, like it's maybe doesn't feel as safe or something. But I was surprised, one, how useful the towel was, but also that like that triggered some pain too. Like I have a history. I guess the best way I could describe it is like gripping. Like I feel like there's an area in my intestines that, and it's like all, it feels all related. At least it's all very close as the crow flies. But from like the deep hip flexors on my left side and the large intestine that's over there, and like it all feels, I don't want to say bound up, but it feels like it's always on a little bit more than it should be on. And when I do the basic lay on your belly, kind of put the rolled up towel there, there's a pretty strong sensation of the area. And I mean, it's kind of painful. It's very tolerable painful, but it's noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
And, but after a little bit of time, there's definitely a shift that takes place. And, it's not like a pivot point where you do one rep and then you're just like fixed forever. But I know you have to like keep nurturing the process, but there is something noticeable, like pretty much immediately once you spend a few minutes there and the body's like accepted this, I don't know, lump of fabric in my lower intestines. And there's some kind of release. And I don't really understand what drives those things to form. I think there's probably multiple different stressors, whether they're like compensatory strategies, the way we move and navigate through space, or maybe there's emotional, mental components of stress, or just like physical trauma or whatever. And I don't know what's happening when the towel makes progress. So I was hoping you could kind of expand on your take on like what triggers these things that we have, like, because everybody probably has something somewhere in their body where there's like a level of tension that's like out of homeostasis. It's like it's just like an inappropriate amount of tension. And I know that the opposite exists also, where people are inhibited and they can't work. But I think overall, most people probably have some things that are, they can call them like tightness, knots, tension, whatever. It feels like a gripping to me. And it feels very good when it releases. But what is your take on where that stuff comes from and what's happening when you make progress through some type of fascia release? I don't know if that's what you would call like your block therapy, some kind of fascia release process.
So this is a great time to dive into fascia really and what is happening. And I call it fascia decompression. I've actually coined that term. So first of all, the fascia system is made up of a number of things, but primarily it's made up of collagen and elastin. The collagen gives our body structure. The elastin allows for mobility and movement. When these two proteins are in balance, what we get is we have all of our cells situated in correct alignment. And the reason that's important is because if they're in their right place, there's optimal space in and around the cell, space for oxygen and nutrients to move into the cell, as well as the removal of toxins and debris away from the cell. So if that's the body, essentially, we should be able to go through time without the body accumulating age, pain, stress, all of those things. However, that's not our reality because we are actually under this constant force of gravity. We're dominant on one side. We have past traumas, past injuries that have added up in the body. Also, what do you do in your life? Are you sitting in front of a computer 8 hours a day? Are you a high-level athlete? Are you a musician where your body is positioned in a specific alignment multiple hours a day? What happens with this is the collagen component of the fascia will migrate to areas of need. So for example, if I'm sitting in front of my computer slumped over for 20, 30 decades, in order for me not to tip off balance, the collagen will migrate to areas to create false walls and false floors, like scaffolding on a building. But this acts like scar tissue, blocking blood and oxygen flow to cells and blocking the ability for the area to become clean. So flow becomes compromised. And the adhesions will grip to everything in its pathway, including bone, with a force of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. And that's the gripping that you're feeling inside. It's all of these adhesions that are forming. And as soon as they start, we get patterned into that negative alignment. And as time goes on, those grooves become deeper, deeper, deeper. And this is really what we view as normal aging or typical aging. We go through this process of being a baby, and I mean, if you're a healthy baby, things have changed today, by the way, from, compared to when we were, babies. But, think of the baby being able to take the leg right over the head. There's optimal space. There's no restriction or adhesion blocking that range of motion. But as we get older, suddenly we become stiffer. And it's because of this migration of collagen. So as that happens and we get locked into these negative patterns, they get anchored in by the limbs. So I just want to jump and talk thoughtfully about the diaphragm, because this is really one of the three pillars of this work. So the diaphragm is this beautiful plate of muscle that when we inhale moves down in the body, when we exhale it lifts. When it's working properly, we are getting a continual massage, a mechanical movement for these organs, which creates heat and energy. It's also the foundation for the rib cage and everything above. So if it's strong, it's supporting this. There's a whole bunch of other amazing things about the diaphragm, but the reality is pain, fear, and stress cause you to reactively hold the breath. So think of a deer who survives an attack. They shake. They let out that negative energy in the moment. But when we have trauma, typically as humans, we hold the breath and then we go from that point forward, aging more dramatically. So if we've had a trauma when we're 3 years old and we lock the breath, now we're not feeding the cells properly. When we breathe diaphragmatically, we feed the cells up to 6 times, 600% more oxygen than breathing through the muscles of the upper chest. So if we're not utilizing this muscle, we're essentially starving the cells. So especially if it happens when we're developing, this is very impactful for how our health will be in future. They've also shown that 84% of weight loss comes through proper exhalation. So here I am in my 20s working out like crazy, and the more I'm working out, the more compressed, ballooned, and toxic I'm becoming because I didn't have that foundation of my proper breath. So when we're feeding 10, 20% of the oxygen required, we're living in survival mode. We're not thriving. And again, because the hands and the feet are the furthest from this engine, which you can also think of the body's furnace. It's really what keeps our tissue temperature balanced and aligned. When it's not working properly, the feet and the hands anchor those negative patterns in. So if we have a frozen shoulder, as an example, and you go for treatments and you get your shoulder work done, it might feel good for the moment. But as soon as we start walking, we're going to get pulled into those negative patterns that created that lack of alignment that's necessary for optimal range of motion of that shoulder. So when we're talking about the fascia, we really have to look at the entire body, because it's really the cell membrane of every single cell connecting every cell. It's the communication system in the body, and it's, again, what creates our structure. Our goal is that we keep every one of our cells in correct alignment, so we do have that optimal space. If we don't, though, and we're not conscious of breath, then we just naturally fall into those patterns of aging and think that that's just typical aging. But we do have so much control over that, and we also have the opportunity to undo what time has done and bring those cells and put that space back into the body through fascia decompression. Gravity creates compression. This work that we do decompresses. So there's 3 pillars to it. The first pillar is the creating space with the tools. And when we're working, we're not sliding on the body. We are staying in position, because pressure over time creates heat in the area. It also allows you to really tap into your breath. As you would have observed in the classes, we always share your breath as your guide. So if you're in any position and it's impacting that relaxed breath, that's your body saying, this is too intense, we need to back off. So we very much teach you that your breath is the key in how you navigate this. Pressure over time with the tools. Then we start teaching people how to breathe diaphragmatically. That inflates the newly created space. Think of blowing up a balloon. A balloon fully blown up is round, it glows, it almost defies gravity, but take half the air out, now it's wrinkled, it's heavy, it accumulates dirt and debris in the creases. That's what our cells are doing as we get older. And I mean, you can actually see that on people's faces. You see how, faces start to hang and you get age spots and you start wrinkling, essentially. But that's because of that lack of oxygen getting to those cells. And then the third pillar we teach is how to maintain proper postural foundation, so we don't just fall back into those negative patterns and then allow gravity to take the wheel. So through this process, we very intentionally, mindful movement, which is the name of your podcast, that's really what it's about. It's about moving intentionally through the layers of fascia to get to the root of the issue at the bone, which is where the fascia will grip and adhere with a force of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. It's an incredible seal, but it's a magnetic seal. If you think of magnets far enough apart, they don't have any attraction, but bring them close together and they'll seal with the force. Now try to pull them apart, almost impossible, if not impossible, but you can slide them apart. So when we're in position and you're connecting into the tool with your breath, we teach you how to shear through the layers by following the path of pain. But the reason it's a good pain is the pressure fibers in the body are larger than the pain fibers. So once you get in position and you settle in with your breath, suddenly that pain that you initially felt, it starts to change a little bit, and it feels almost like an itch you can't scratch. It feels like that good pain. And then you want to search for more. And then what you're doing by that searching for more and going deeper is you're melting through deeper and deeper layers of adhesion, awakening cells previously blocked so they can become part of your conscious awareness. And that's really the process of what we do with this work.
Okay, Deanna, you just went over a lot of stuff. I have a bunch of questions. You just mentioned something about a pressure fiber. What are you referring to about when you say a pressure fiber as opposed to a pain fiber?
So it's the way that the signals from the brain to the body go. So a TENS machine as an example, that's really awakening the pressure fibers. So like if you put those, what are they called? Those leads on the body, and you encircle pain, it's sending in a frequency of pressure. And then that will override the pain as long as that frequency is moving in, because the pressure fibers are bigger in diameter.
You're saying fibers that like detect pressure? Like, yes. Are these muscle fibers or?
They're fascia fibers. All of the things that we feel. We put our hand on a burning element and we feel pain, so that we take that hand away. So wherever we're feeling pain is a pain signal, but the pressure signal is faster to go to the brain, and it will override that pain signal because it's actually larger in diameter. So the signal will move faster.
But sometimes if you put pressure on something, it causes pain, right? I'm confused.
So, I mean, as an example, if I move deeply enough into any part of my body, I will absolutely feel pain because we are not aligned, and pain equals adhesion. So think of the pain that a cell expresses as being no different than a baby crying. You know, when the baby's crying, it's hungry, it's dirty, it's tired, it wants love, whatever it is, it's giving you information. So when a cell is giving you a pain signal, it's letting you know any one of those things. It's compressed, it doesn't have the room to function, so it's not getting its food, it's not getting hydrated. It will be exhausted now because it's trying to work so hard on your behalf, but we're not giving those cells what they require to function well. I like using the example, think of yourself in an elevator. You're the only person in there, you've got room to move and breathe, and you feel fine. Now you walk into an elevator and it's squished, and you're getting pushed in the back corner, and somebody has really offensive perfume on, and two people are arguing really loud, and you're in there and you're just like, oh my God, let me out of here, let me out of here. So that's what the cells are going through when they don't have the space, the room to breathe, to receive nutrients, to get rid of the dirt and the debris. So they give you a signal. They're like, hey, mom or dad, I'm not happy right now. I'm letting you know I need some love and attention. So that's why we feel pain when we move in, because we are not aligned. We don't have optimal space in the body. It's the body letting you know that, okay, we need to make some changes unless we want to stay in the direction that gravity's taking us.
Right. Pain is a feedback mechanism. The adhesions, you said so adhesions are like more dense collagen?
So scar tissue, I mean, basically, if we have
so adhesion and scar tissue, are those like interchangeable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're interchangeable, but they're created differently. So scar tissue is going to be created from a cut or a surgery, an injury, something tears in the moment.
Gotcha.
And then we teach people actually how to address those tears differently than I was traditionally trained with the RICE method. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. We don't ice the body because the body's already too cold. It's already frozen. So if I sprain my ankle as an example, now I've created a gap. There's a tear. The second law of thermodynamics is nature abhors a gradient, which means when there's a gap in the system, nature's going to fill it in. So if I sprain my ankle and I have a tear in the tendon or the ligament, through the inflammation, the body is sending the requirements to rebuild that tissue. So if I go and I ice for 48 to 72 hours and I limit that inflammation, now I'm not giving the body the opportunity to rebuild. So then what happens, because the gradient is still there, nature's still going to fill it in, the collagen and all of the surrounding tissue dumps in to create scar tissue, and it creates this netting, but it's taking from what's around it. So like imagine if I take this circle of my shirt and I sew it together, now it's different. So that's what happens when we heal with scar tissue. What we teach people to do is support inflammation. Don't stop it. This is when the baby's crying the most. It needs the most love and attention. And so think of baking a cake. If we put in oil and flour and sugar and eggs and we whip it up, you get batter. If you put batter in the freezer, you have frozen batter. If you put batter in the oven, you bake cake. We need to add heat, add energy to the body where there's an insult, so we can support the inflammation and allow the body to bake what is necessary for rebuilding. That's how we teach people how to address acute injury. So that's what happens with acute injury, where with adhesion, what happens, think of walking a 120-pound dog. If he's walking beside you and he's not tugging on your body, you're balanced. If he's pulling on you, it's the opposite side of the body that has to contract to stop you from tipping over. So with our alignment, this becomes a slow forming migration of collagen throughout the entire body, which is why as we get older, we get stiffer, because now we're getting adhesions, which again act like scar tissue. And there will be some areas of adhesion where there's a ton of accumulation that gets really bound, and that becomes an issue. But also it's constantly in motion as we continue to tip off balance.
So you're saying that the body is moving or synthesizing more collagen in an area to try to help you essentially
Yes.
because of whatever. So
Yeah,
it's like a
the body's always
response.
trying to support us. But if we don't give the body what it needs to thrive, we will have a body that is accumulating stress, dis-ease, pain, tension, simply to function instead
Gotcha.
of thrive.
So that makes sense. I mean, I could see if you're, walking a heavy dog and it's pulling you and you're essentially creating a compensatory like strategy to survive and go through, and you're going to have, changes in the structures and the functions that are kind of trying to hold you from falling on your face, whatever. But then, like, what about when people talk about more of that emotional connection where you could have areas in the body. Like I don't feel like in my example, I don't think I ever got like punched in the gut or like I don't think I had a traumatic thing. I mean, I'm sure we're all asymmetrical, and I have some probably my own asymmetries when I'm navigating through space. But I mean, I've had times where I've had emotional breakthroughs that seem to have near instantaneous impact on tissue relationships and the way I can move. So, like, I'm not changing collagen in that moment. Like, what? Right, like, is every tight area just more collagen that's clumped up, or is this
More
like
collagen that's clumped
tissue
up.
have its own kind of um, I don't know properties that maybe we can't measure where it holds memories of some sort?
So that's where the breath and the understanding of what happens when we incur trauma comes from. So if I had an emotional hit, and it could have been a big trauma, it could have been a little trauma that's repetitive. I have for example, a bully at school who you're always scared to go and see. That impacts us in our diaphragm. We reactively hold the breath. As soon as we hold the breath, we lock in a different alignment. And as that adds up, that creates tension because now I don't have a symmetrical core that gets patterned into the limbs. Now this diaphragm isn't working optimally, and now I'm not able to keep this area open and spacious. So it really, the breath is the key to all of it in my view, because pain, fear, stress cause you to reactively hold the breath. If we don't release that pattern, then we continue to age in that pattern. And let's say I have a parent and I'm a boy, and I'm always told, you're not supposed to cry. So every time I feel sad and I want to express tears, I'm holding it back. We hold back by holding the breath, but our body's designed to survive. So we're still going to breathe, but that's going to change the breathing pattern, and we're going to be breathing up through here. So that sadness gets locked in to the body in a whole bunch of positions. And yeah, to know offhand, is it your calves? Is it your thighs? Like, where am I holding it? Obviously, if you've had a trauma in a specific area, absolutely the emotion and the physical thing will be stored in that space. But there's so many things happening traumatically to us all the time because it can be patterned in from something to somebody that doesn't seem seemingly obvious to someone else. It's a hit. I mean, for me, because I came from a world where being overweight meant you weren't as worthy. I was so triggered. If somebody, I mean, to this day, if somebody says, wow, you're looking a little fat today, I'd be triggered by that. And I would be like, but then I'd be like, okay, I know what to do to release that. And then I would go and I would do some more detoxing because obviously there's an issue. But that's the thing, like we all have our own mindset as to what trauma is. And something to someone could be a nothing, and to somebody else it could be the biggest thing in the world. And yeah, it's held in the body, and the further you go from that point of trauma, the more those adhesions pull the entire body into that equation. And that's why it's so important to understand too, like when we're babies and we're developing, if we don't have that ability to express and feel cared and feel loved. And I actually did a really cool podcast with Amy Apigian about, she wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, and she had mentioned that from birth to 9 months, if we don't appropriately crawl on or move on our abdomen which teaches us to move toward what we desire or move away from what we don't, that can be the source of massive autoimmune diseases down the road. So it's fascinating. And I mean, interestingly too, I love that conversation because every single class we start with, we start on the belly. The belly is the key. Right at the belly button, this is where we're connected to our mother when we're born. The 72,000 currents that move the life force throughout the entire body, they are situated in the belly button. So this area is so significant and important, and this is where we store so much fear and pain. And then again, if we don't release that, it gets locked into how we perceive life. So your perception of life is tied into your breath. The frequency of your brain is tied into your breath. If we're breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, we have a different frequency, keeping you locked in stress mode. Breathing diaphragmatically brings you to the moment. There's so many books written on this. I love James Nestor's book, Breath. I mean, I would assume you've probably read it. I shouldn't make that assumption, but it's so
actually,
lovely.
he was on the podcast when it came out.
Fantastic.
He's great. Yeah, big fan.
Yeah.
You said something a moment ago, 72,000 currents? What are you talking about?
Yeah, they're called nadis. So the chakra system in the body,
Okay.
the nadis are what distribute. So we've got these wheels that distribute the life force, and it's through the nadis, these currents, that we support that energy to the cells in the body. And of course, when we're born, we're attached to the mother in the womb, and this is where they all accumulate.
That's interesting. 72,000. I wonder who counted all that up.
I
Yeah,
have no idea.
there does seem to be something that's like really significant around that like center,
Yes.
around that belly button. And it's interesting. And you know, when you mentioned earlier, like you got present when you put your fingers or hands in your guts, like it is a guaranteed like delivery system of getting you present. There's something about, I don't know if it's like we're so used to guarding it, protecting it, like all of our vital organs or something. But when you let go enough and allow something to kind of enter the space, it's like you can't really be somewhere else. You're getting a lot of information and feedback from it. So
Well,
yeah,
and
I
the nice
did notice
thing
that you
too-
always start there, no matter
Yeah.
what the topic is of a video. It's always on your belly with something jammed in it.
Because also when we start breathing from this space, we turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. So that keeps us in that rest and digest mode. If we're in sympathetic, then most people are 24/7 in sympathetic, living in fight or flight. I read in another book, we should be in parasympathetic up to 80% of the day. And if most people are in sympathetic 100% of their day, I even listened to another podcast recently where they said even when we're sleeping now, we're not getting into that proper rest anymore. Even in sympathetic when we're sleeping. So we're just exhausted. And we're simply just like getting through life in this survival mode. And you know, so the way I see the breath working, if we're only feeding 10-20% of the oxygen to the cells, of course, the body's going to direct the energy where it needs to survive. And your heart, your brain, your liver, your stomach, all these are very essential organs to survive. But if we want to thrive, the cell in the toe is of no value than the cell in your heart or your brain. Everything is equal from a perspective of thriving. And that's where we spend so much time working people's feet, because they say in yoga that the toes are the eyes of the feet or the eyes of the body. And if we're not conscious of these little guys, which most people aren't, we end up, again, patterning in this negative alignment, because the toes are also here to direct us in how we move in life. And yet most people's toes aren't even really a thought or a consideration.
Yeah, toes are a big deal. You mentioned gravity a couple times. And like your process, you're trying to decompress and essentially account for or fight the good fight against this this constant force that's slamming us down onto this planet. Is gravity inherently problematic, or do you think it's just when things are out of position, its effect is like creating like issues? Because if you already have like a postural thing, you're kind of loading that problem with gravity. Or is it inherently just something that we're always fighting against? Like I would think that if we're, matching whatever you would call like the anatomical design, whether it's the way we move, the way we manage ourselves in, in this environment with the parameters we have, ground, space, three planes, gravity and such. I would think that gravity itself shouldn't like beat us down. Or
Agree. And I mean, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and the conscious exhale lifts us with every single breath. But most people aren't utilizing this plate of muscle in the center of our being. Again, when we inhale, it moves down. When we exhale, it lifts. Most people also aren't, even if they're doing breath work, aren't really focusing on that full exhale. That's why I love James Nestor's book. We've been teaching this for so long, and he was saying, like, when we exhale for longer than we inhale, then we increase the carbon dioxide in the blood, which is the currency for the oxygen to get into the cell. So if we're doing breath work, but the exhale is not the focus, then we might have a body full of oxygen, but it's not getting delivered to where we need it. So when we are in, let's call it perfection, which none of us will ever be, but let's say we are, in yoga, they will call this effortless effort. We are magnetized in this crystalline structure, and we can walk through life because that exhale is working beautifully with every breath, countering gravity with every single breath. But gravity loves density. So as soon as I start falling off balance, and now I have that collagen migrating to areas of need, now I have a denser place in my body, and gravity loves it. So now it's going to grip me, and it's going to continue to impact me as I go through time. And then again, those movements get patterned in. So unless we're conscious of releasing it, then it's going to continue to develop more and more. Like a black hole, it will keep pulling more and more and more collagen into that space, creating a body that's not aligned.
So to clarify my question, like if things are lined up, you think gravity's not really an issue? Or do you feel like it's kind of one of the drivers of aging or whatever?
Well, it's a driver of aging if we're unconscious. But I mean, we need gravity. I mean, like, if we're up in outer space and we don't have gravity impacting the body, then there's a whole raft of other issues that occur because of gravity. Like, we need gravity for bone density. We need gravity to keep our body strong. It's like, the tree, if it's never stressed, it'll be weaker than if it's stressed all the time. So gravity is a stress, essentially. But if we know how to be balanced amongst that stress, then to me, gravity is just what it is. It's we're here on this planet. We're not going to fly off of the earth. But if we don't have alignment and we have a lack of space in areas of the body, then gravity becomes a hindrance and continues to drive us. Just like when I look at a body, I always look at the feet first, and there will always be a foot that is like a flat tire, and it pulls the body away from alignment, and then the other side has to anchor to keep you balanced. So that's what gravity's going to do. It's if my front right tire is flat and I'm having problems with my car, and I go and get the problems fixed, but I don't address the flat tire, the problems are going to continue until I pump up that tire. Then the problems are what they are.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I have a history working in a gym environment. I have a local gym here, and I used to do like all kinds of assessments, and I learned all kinds of assessments from really some great minds in the movement field. And one of them, which was interesting, we would kind of test which way people would naturally go. And we would just say, walk like 20 yards with your eyes closed. And and it would just be interesting data. And sometimes it was really useful data. But I learned it in this one gym, and then I was practicing it in my gym, and we have this speaker system where people would kind of know where they were relative to the sound coming. So they would just cheat. They would like try to beat the exercise and try. Everybody wanted to walk straight, but nobody walked straight. Like nobody's walking 20 yards in a straight line with their eyes closed. Even if things are moving great, we're naturally asymmetrical. We have all kinds of asymmetries naturally within the trunk especially. So it was funny, like we abandoned that extra, it didn't last long because we saw people would like hear that they were off because the music was coming from far away, and they would be shifting. But yeah, like everybody, we would test people in all like three planes, primarily in like the frontal and sagittal plane. So for the listeners, it's like, think of the side bendy plane or the twisty plane that is always being imposed on us, that we always have to account for that when we're moving through space. And we would just kind of find where are the weak links in the chain, like directionally. And then in our like what you could call like corrective exercises. We would try to nurture those asymmetries or whatever. But one thing is for sure, everybody has them. Like everybody is crooked somewhere, and you definitely see it in the feet. You know, generally it is like one foot is more likely to be like pronated and turned out, and you have this whole effect that goes all the way up to like the opposite shoulder, and and you can't hide from it. Like you can't outthink of it. Like you need some kind of environmental stimulus to respond to, because that's like the way our brain learns how to move. I guess it needs the gravity. Like without the gravity, we have nothing to stand up against. So you need
Yeah.
you need something to kind of organize yourself against this external stimulus. But
Another
yeah,
thing that was really fascinating as I've gone through this journey, and I use my community as test subjects. So a couple of years ago, I wanted to see what working in the eyes would do. So I had 13 people as a test, and they'd all had concussions. And I wanted to know if working in the eyes along with the body would create the necessary progress to get them out of the 10 markers that we had, like headaches, migraines, brain fog, lack of sleeping, irritability, like whatever they were. And it was amazing because I had them working in their eyes every night along with also the whole body. And it was funny because if I'll do a challenge, I'll get people to send in before and afters, but I didn't ask them to because I just wanted to see if this would help them. And it helped all of them in all of the markers. But what was really cool was a couple of the people took photos and sent me the befores and afters. And prior to that, I had just done a challenge focusing on the whole body for an alignment effect. When I saw these side pictures of the befores and afters, I was blown away at how much more they were standing where they should be in their body because of the release of the eyes. So now this
are you
has
talking about
become
eye exercises like moving the eyes? Or are you talking about using your tools around the eye?
not tools, people's
Oh,
hands.
okay.
So that combined with eye exercises. So just as an example, and I mean, everybody can try this, and I would highly recommend you do it at night. Take contacts out if you have them, but just close your eyes and just put gentle pressure with your two fingers on the eyes, but hold. We always hold for 3 minutes because we are working to melt adhesions, and you can't rush melting. So through that holding, we start to create, again, pressure with breath. Same thing, no matter where you're working. And I mean, if we think about what the eyes are absorbing every day that they're open, my gosh, like it's so toxic. So they're absorbing garbage, garbage, garbage constantly. So as we start going through this process, no different than everywhere else, we start releasing the buildup of garbage and debris. We start melting the adhesions. Just like a ball and socket joint, like your shoulder, the eyes also are a ball in a socket. And if I've been sitting this way in front of a computer for decades, now my eyes have started to adhere to the orbits in whatever pattern that they're in. So try taking them through a full range of motion. So that's another thing that we do is you close your eyes, look up to 12 o'clock, take one full slow breath, then 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock, do the full circle. And then wherever you feel pain or weakness, you want to go back there and hold for 5 to 10 slow exhales to, again, pump that intention, that life into that space. I mean, just from an aesthetic perspective, people that end up with a hooded eye, is probably because you've been sitting like this, and now like I never take my eye far enough into that space to strengthen those muscles. So now we don't have a floor and the tissue starts to fold over and become weak. So this is the work that we teach people to do, and it's not just function and it's appearance, it's aesthetics, it's everything, because we want our cells to be balanced with collagen and elastin, the structure and the mobility. But if we never go to, if you don't use it, you lose it essentially, right? So if we are always not going to a certain place in our body, that place gets shut off with adhesion.
Do you know, I never really think much about elastin, Deanna. Is there anything like nutritionally, like do you know what elastin's made of, or is that like a structure? Is elastin like a hormone? What is elastin?
It's a protein.
It's a protein.
That's as far as I know. I'm
Gotcha.
not a detail-oriented
That's
person.
that's fine. I might I don't know. I might be on
But
AI
see, like
later looking at
elastin,
that.
like think of somebody with connective tissue disorder, whatever it
Right.
is, Ehlers-Danlos or something.
Right.
So the way I see that body is they would have absolutely had a traumatic event in their developmental years. So I'm 3 years old, I have an injury, I witness something, whatever, I hold my breath. Now the collagen is going here. and it's locking here. So as I'm continuing to develop, there's an imbalance in the collagen and elastin. So now I don't have the collagen moving into my limbs as readily. So now I'm hypermobile. But I'm hypermobile in my limbs, but I'm hyper adhered in my core and my gut. And I work with a lot of people with this, and I see it all the time. So we need to, again, get back to the breaths. We start releasing, bringing balance, letting those fibers that got trapped here, letting them migrate to where they're supposed to be to bring that connective tissue back into that structural component that's necessary.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Ehlers-Danlos is an interesting thing. It seems like there is there's something going on with that lack of structure around that collagen. That could be a whole nother episode. So let's talk a little bit about block therapy. So you created a modality where you basically made a toy to access some of these practices. And it looks kind of like a yoga block, maybe slightly different dimensions, but a lot smoother on the edges and the corners.
So yes, so I actually have a factory here in Winnipeg, and we use reclaimed elm. Our city is riddled with these beautiful elm trees, but it's also rampant with Dutch elm disease. So the disease is in the bark, though. These 100-year-old trees that get cut down, the wood is perfectly usable. So this is what we use. And the reason we use wood is because bone and wood are similar in density. So as I'm lying on this tool, if I had like a fascia roller or something that's kind of porous, it's going to affect some surface layers, but I want to be able to melt through all of the layers to get to the root of the issue, which will be at the bone, which is why we use wood. So these are the two different size tools we use in block therapy. This is the Block Buddy. We always say if you're over 5 feet, get this one. If you're under 5 feet, this is the baby. But most people love having both because there's certain areas like the sideways position, for example. This is like my favorite position, but if you have a really compressed core, this might not fit very nicely in through here. So it's lovely to have both. Plus we also have a bunch of classes where we use both tools at the same time. So they're very specifically shaped to be nice and smooth and contoured so that we can get into the soft areas of the body and go deep in a comfortable way. So that's why these tools are made the way that they are.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's got a nice aesthetic too. So, does a lot of your content basically show using how to use those? So if people get those, they could just go on your YouTube channel and watch like what to do with them. Or when you buy them, does it come with any?
Oh yeah, so we have a starter program, and the starter program, you keep the starter program for life, and you get 9 classes with a block class as well as a corrective exercise. There's also a 2-hour seated class. Some people can't start on the floor for whatever reason, so we also have an option to do a full body class in a chair. And there's also a number of additional classes in there. I show the releasing the webbing between the fingers and the toes. This, for a long time, was probably one of my most exciting new things to really understand, was how to bring the toes back into balance and how to release the fingers. Because again, they're the furthest from the diaphragm, so this is where we pattern in. And if you look at a body, when we are anatomically correct, palms should be forward. But most people have their palms facing the back of the body. That creates that internal rotation of the arms. It causes added pressure and stress into the rib cage and pulls us forward and down. So by releasing the fingers and the toes, we have this opportunity to really repattern everything. And it's also an area of energy release. So if we do have trauma that, well, we all do, that we are disrupting through this process, we want it to leave the body appropriately and not just get jarred up and then stuck. So the limbs are really key for this. And then the other thing is the tongue decompression technique, which for the last 6 months has been the newest thing we're sharing with people to do, and the changes people are having as a result of releasing this jaw and bringing symmetry and breadth back into the space, opening up the lymphatics, improving that blood and oxygen flow into the head. Truly incredible, because again, the jaw, like the eyes, will also lock us in those negative alignments. So even if you're working full body but you forget that, that's going to still pattern you over. Like, it's amazing how powerful that gravity pull is when we do have density. So all of these are in there as well as other videos.
You said palms forward. I've never heard that. You're saying that, in your opinion, we should naturally have our palms forward when we're just hanging out, like standing?
That's not my opinion. That's anatomical position. So if you look at a skeleton, That's how the skeleton hangs, palms forward. That's anatomical position. I learned that also in yoga. But again, because we're collapsed through here, driven by the feet, that's what happens. We internally rotate the arms. So in order to bring that lift and that alignment back, that's where we should naturally be at rest, kind of like where the tongue should be. It should be up at the surface of the roof of the mouth, but most people, because again, we're pulled forward and twisted, their tongue is too far to the front of their teeth and pulled off in one direction. So we are so far from where we should be in perfection, but these are the markers that let us know that we're moving in the right direction.
Never heard that about the palms forward thing. Why don't we ever see someone with their, I don't know if I've ever seen people with palms forward. Do you ever
No.
see people?
No, I don't.
Why?
Now,
So
my
why
community's
would
all
that be
working on it,
called
so they're getting there, but
why would that be considered the anatomical position then? That I'm not sure. I'm not convinced of that. I'm not
just
convinced.
Google it and it'll show you. Look at a skeleton. It's how they hang when they're constructed.
But we don't hang like.
Because we're not aligned. We're pulled forward and we're twisted, each and every one of us.
But what if you took like if you think of like performance at the highest level, let's say like a Usain Bolt, and you watch
Who's
like
that?
a sprinter.
Sorry, I don't really.
Like if you look at like a top sprinter of the world
Okay.
or something, like if that was useful, they would do that, right? Like
If they knew.
well, we'll agree to disagree on that one. So, and you mentioned, what did you say about the tongue? About you say people's tongues is too far forward or back? What?
So about a pinky nail distance from the teeth, there's a ridge. The tongue perfectly docks in that ridge, and the surface of the tongue should be suctioned to the roof of the mouth. It's now, I mean, in the last, 8 months, suddenly everybody's talking about mewing, and really that's what it is. It's suctioning the tongue up to the roof of the mouth. That's where it should be at rest. Mine isn't there at rest. It's a lot closer to there when it's at rest from the work that I'm doing, but if I'm not conscious, my tongue will dart forward and go to the right, and I'll clench more on the left side. So we want to have the tongue there in correct position. James Nestor mentioned that as well about the tongue. And what's really interesting to note is when the tongue is in correct position, we can't breathe through the mouth. So we're supposed to be breathing in and out through the nose at all times, unless we're doing an exercise that suggests we should be exhaling and inhaling, or exhaling through the mouth. I don't think we should ever be inhaling.
So wait, are you using the wooden thing, the blocks, to work on the tongue, or no?
No, that's...
Oh, these are just...
Well, we work all through this with the blocks. I work inside the mouth with my hands, but then as an exercise, that's where the tongue should be at rest.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on that. If you have any more time, can you talk a little bit about the book? Is that essentially detailing, like, how is that different than if somebody were to watch like the block therapy content, like the video stuff?
Yes, it is just detailing my journey, what this work does, what fascia decompression is all about, and really just all of the different systems that it impacts, because fascia innervates every single cell in the body, every system in the body. So no matter what it is that you're dealing with, the fascia will be at least in part responsible. And that's it, yeah. So the book details that, but we have so many videos on YouTube that people can access at no charge and learn along the way that way as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, personally, like, what's your routine? Like, you've obviously spent a lot of time on all this stuff. What have you, how have you like curated the way that you integrate this with your like day-to-day life?
The first thing that I do now, I always get up, I have my bath, and I do my tongue decompression first thing in the morning to get the brain going, to get any stagnancy out, to make sure that my jaw is aligned. I also oftentimes, even before I get out of bed, I will lie on this just to get the breath going.
Oh,
I might even
in
do
bed still?
Oh yeah, that's
Okay.
the lovely part. I mean, it's all done lying down. Well, again, I do have some chair classes, but for the most part, you're lying either on a yoga mat, or you can do this in bed, which is lovely for people that struggle to get up and down. So even just in the morning, just to get the breath awake and going, just to energize the body before I get up, to bring my body into that parasympathetic state before I start my day, so I'm calm and I'm present in my day. So those are the things that I start my day with. And then What's lovely is that the toe and the hand work, you don't have to do it all at once, but oftentimes I'll be on a Zoom call and I'll be working my fingers to release them, 3 minutes between each hand. This way, we've got videos on that all over the place. Between the toes, you can use a finger, you can put like a cord or a rope and you can pull between the toes. We want to feel pain because that's where those adhesions are, but we want to create more space so that we have that life, we have that mobility, no different than a shoulder, but the shoulder's going to get locked in by the hand, right? So these are the practices I'll do throughout the day. And then it's really focusing on that exhale for a count of 6. It took me 2 years to become an conscious breather, but now I'm breathing all the time through the belly. But I'm also always thinking of that. If I'm driving, if I'm doing something and I feel stressed, I'm aware that my breath is impacted. So I'll get back to that breath. And then, of course, my exercise is working on patience or blocking. So whenever I have time.
So no like traditional exercise. You look fairly fit. Like you don't have any more traditional like resistance training or.
I do not. Patient work is pretty intense for me. But no, I don't do any weights or anything like that anymore. And I'm 56 now. So, when I was in my 20s and I was very unhealthy, if you add 30 years to that person, it's not this. I don't even think I'd be alive today, to be honest, if I hadn't found this.
Interesting. Like I take my exercise routine pretty seriously. It's a big part of my life. And I go in like phases. But one thing I've noticed is depending upon the tool that I'm using more, like I feel that all the exercise tools kind of exist on a spectrum, and it's like some are more rigid and some are more forgiving, and like some, like the rigidity of a barbell offers certain benefits that other things can't, but it's not forgiving. Like it doesn't. It's a relentless tool, and then body weight exercise might be on the other end of the spectrum, and where there's a lot more forgiving nature to them, but also you don't necessarily get the same, like, let's say, strength or hypertrophy goals. Like you can't overload it the same way. But one thing I've noticed is right now I'm in a phase where I'm using the barbell, and I love it. Like I love all the tools. I wish I had the capacity to just do all the things every day, but I have to like space it out over the course of the year. But one thing I do notice as I use these less forgiving tools that have more rigidity, they create like benefits from the tension, but they also create more tension. So I do feel like even though I get stronger with them, I feel more tense. So I'm as I get older, I'm really gravitating to when I'm doing those. I'm spending a lot more time with this kind of stuff, a lot more time with fascial release, a lot more time on a foam roller, a lot more time on my like evening stretches to find the balance where I get all the things I want.
And the thing is that the thing that's different and that's really important to know, especially if you love doing that work, is let's say I'm like doing a bicep curl. We get caught in the grooves, and so we're strengthening the cells that we have available, and we're bringing them into this place of tension through the strengthening. What this work does is it integrates other cells into the equation. So I'm a big believer in isometrics. That's part of what we teach in block therapy. A lot of positions, for example, you might be in a armpit or pec position, and if you're holding that shoulder up for 30, 63 minutes to the point where you're shaking, you're integrating. We're also at the same time releasing what's holding your arm in that incorrect alignment.
Wait, you'll do a 30-minute isometric exercise? Is that what?
3 minutes.
Oh,
3
3
minutes.
minutes. I thought you said
3 minutes.
30.
Yeah. Sorry if I said 30, I meant 3.
Yeah. Oh, and for the listeners, by the way, if you're not, isometric refers to like kind of stillness. So you're not, concentric is like a shortening of a muscle, and eccentric is like the lengthening, and isometric is like a static hold, if you will.
Yeah, and then when you get to that point where you shake with that isometrics, you're bringing more cells to life. So if we're as strong as we are, but we only have 10, 20% of our cells that we're feeding fuel to, then we're only as strong as we can be. But if we integrate and we're suddenly feeding oxygen to all of the cells in that muscle, now we're that much stronger. So it's a different mindset entirely. I was the one in the gym, again, in my 20s as an athletic therapist. I'm in the gym. I could do, as a woman, I was pretty proud because I had the 245-pound plates and I could do 10 bench presses. But you should have seen me. It wasn't a good look. And I wasn't strong, except if I was doing that one thing. I was hurting. I was thick. I wasn't mobile. So, just because I could lift a lot didn't mean I was functionally healthy and strong. So I've learned so much through the journey. Yoga taught me so much. I started again Iyengar yoga. I was in the pathway to become an Iyengar teacher, and then that was when this whole awakening happened for me. So I definitely took a lot of what I learned from that, and there's a lot of foundational pieces into that, especially when it comes to alignment and the breath piece. But the fascia decompression was an internal navigation, and then applying what I was learning to my clients, and then teaching people how to do the self-care, which was a decade after. Fluid isometrics was the technique I first developed. Block therapy is the self-care version of that technique. And it follows the Fibonacci sequence, the spiral pattern of everything in nature. Everything in the universe is, the architecture is based on the Fibonacci sequence. There's no straight lines in nature. Everything moves in waves and spirals. How the body forms, even how the body ages. And that's why when we're in positions, we teach you to slowly shear so that you can move those layers apart to get to the deeper adhesions so that we can get to the root.
That's interesting. Wait, how do you work the Fibonacci sequence into the routine?
So it's the patterning of how we teach people. So as an example, the body work first. When I'm working in people's bodies, I'm doing this. It's almost like looking at Tai Chi, but deep in the tissue with my hands. I'm never stroking. Stroking is like, again, taking that, fascia roller and you're rolling. And that'll stimulate surface heat, but we're not going to get through those layers. We have to move in the way that they were formed to unlock the seams of time to get that life back into those newly created spaces.
Okay. Unlock the seams of time. That sounds nice. We'll end on that. Deanna, I really appreciate you coming on today and giving us a little lesson about fascia release and such. If people want to learn more, where do they go?
Blocktherapy.com is my website, and one other place, if I can direct people to two different places. I have a lovely Facebook community with over 20,000 members called Block Therapy Community. It's welcome to everybody. It's such a lovely place. We've got our entire community sharing, and it's filled with wisdom. So if you're the person with MS or with chronic pain or with anything, if you ask questions in there, you're going to have people also answering on behalf of what they've gone through to take them to this place.
Okay. And do you do in-person stuff too? You said you work with clients hands.
I do not so much, but
Okay.
I still do see the odd client here and there.
Gotcha.
And I believe we also have a free gift for everybody. Can I share that?
Sure, go on.
Yeah, so that initial 9-part series using the rolled up towel that we've given you already, that's for everybody to start with and try. So they can get that at no charge and just dive in right now with a towel. And you're going to know if this speaks to you or not just by lying on that towel. The towel's lovely because it's the teaching. There's no question that the blocks gain you a different access in the body, but when you are intentional with pressure over time for 3 minutes and breath, magic happens.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for offering that, and we'll link to that in the show notes, everybody. For the listeners, always grateful for your listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Deanna, thanks again for coming on, and I look forward to our paths crossing again sometime.
I do too. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Have a great day, everybody.
You too.